commence our information session for Williamson Community Leadership Program 2026. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I am joining from the inner west of Melbourne in Footscray on Bunurong country of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and the waters on which we gather and connect. We pay our respects to the leadership, storytelling, and teaching of First Nations peoples and to their elders past and present. Leadership Victoria accepts the invitation of the Uluru Statement of the Heart to walk together with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We're here today to talk about our flagship Williamson Community Leadership Program, an immersive and selective program for leaders across business, government and the community sector. My name is Tara Crow and I'm the Partnerships Lead at Leadership Victoria. I would like to, today we'll be hearing from Leadership Victoria faculty, Dr. Katie McDevitt and Jodie Dutram, who will be our core faculty for the 2026 program. We also have with us today as well 2 recent Williamson Fellows. Alma Rahim is a Williamson 2022 Fellow, and she's from Beaumont People, a purpose-led recruitment recruitment agency. Alma's experience in Williamson came at a time when she was actively questioning what's next and credits the program to affirming her values. Jay Mueller is a 2023 Fellow, and Jay is currently the Content Director at Triple M Radio and is a board member of the Melbourne Press Club. As an editor, producer and reporter, Jay has had an extensive career in the media. As a Williamson Fellow, Jay will share his experience in the program and how the learnings of adaptive leadership support him in his corporate role today. But first, I'd like to hand over to my colleagues, Katie McDevitt, who will give us an overview of what to expect with the Williamson Community Leadership Program. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks very much, Tara. Adding my voice of acknowledgement to what you've just shared, and you find me here this evening on Bunurong, Boonwurrung country, just southeast of Naarm. Absolute pleasure to be here this evening. So I'm going to spend a few minutes giving you a tour, a very quick one this evening, of the program. But first, I'd also like to introduce you to Jodie Dutram, who will be working with me, looking after coaching, leader development, and the overall size and shape of the program next year as well. A little bit about me. You might be able to tell I'm a Londoner by birth and upbringing, and I've been in Australia for almost 20 years now and practicing full-time as a coach and facilitator. My background includes specialisms in vertical leadership development, which you'll hear a little bit more from Alma and Jay about what that's about. And I love to work with leaders to cultivate a deeper sense of purpose combined with really solid impact work. So trying to combine those two things. Jodie, would you like to introduce yourself and say hello?
Yes, thank you, Katie. I'm so excited to be here tonight, and thank you. I'm a program designer, leadership facilitator, and coach as well. And as has been mentioned, one of the co-facilitators of the program. But really, my bread and butter has been about helping leaders kind of navigate those complex places with lots of clarity, finding confidence, and doing it with authenticity. So it's really about where I've had a lot of impact, whether it's with executives, entrepreneurs, or leadership teams across all sectors. It's really been about kind of getting them to the root of challenges and leading with some real impact. So really keen for welcoming everyone, whoever ends up working with us over the next year. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Jodie. And Ryan Davis is also here, and Ryan is one of our amazing program coordinators working on the program. You'll get to know him as well. Ryan, would you mind bringing up the next slide for me? Thank you very much. And if you can scoot forwards to vision, purpose, and values, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So I want to actually begin with the question of what kind of leadership do we aim to cultivate through the Williamson program? It's a question that we bring often to each year, each cohort of leaders who comes through the program. And it's important to hold on to your own vision, to think about how you want to lead for an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable society and community. And to do that with real purpose means coming together as a community of intentional learners in your Williamson year. So we place a great emphasis on cultivating a diversity of thought based on the diversity of backgrounds, experiences, identities, communities that is there present in the program. And we believe that by leading from that really diverse base, we really will do better with the social challenges that we're now facing. And they're big and complex ones. We're also doing that by tuning into our values as well. So at Leadership Victoria, we work with leaders to cultivate courage, integrity, curiosity, and respect. So moving forwards into the Williamson Community Leadership Program experience itself, you'll hear words like unique, immersive, broad, deep, and it's all of those things. And we also work with an idea of what leadership is about. We want leaders who can mobilize others to make progress towards important outcomes and to thrive. So the kind of leadership that you get to work on in the program is really about acknowledging the complexity and the challenge, as well as the opportunities of our current reality, the current situation, and moving forwards into a future state in which progress has been made. And the reality is we need excellent leadership. We need sustainable leadership in order to do that. I'm just going to pause for a moment because I'm not quite sure what slide we're on. But Ryan, if you can help us align to the slide that shows the 2024 cohort in Marysville, that would be wonderful. And that's the quote from Tom O'Connell there. Just a couple more forwards. Thank you. So moving from exactly where we are, understanding our situation, and really thinking about what do we tap into as leaders, individually and collectively, in order to mobilize for change. So remember, inner development that leads to outer transformation in the world. Not a small ask, a big one. And so we try and do that together. There's a great emphasis in the program on peer learning. And so as much as I would love to say that Jodie and I are the most important parts of the program, it's actually the community that you become a part of. And you will be joining 1,400 plus Williamson Fellows and becoming part of that greater peer-to-peer learning and leadership community as well. So there is a combination of challenge and support in this community across a group of 40 to 50 leaders. We don't all agree. We encourage you not to seek agreement on everything. We want you to have a really robust conversation through the year. And that's where a lot of the learning will come from. You'll hear Jay and Alma talking about that in a few minutes. Can you move forwards, please, Ryan? Thank you. Some headlines about what to expect in terms of focus points in the program. I love this quote from Mark Davis, who I had the pleasure of working with in the program, one of our Williamson Fellows of more recent years. And he describes the program as a Venn diagram of you with others in community. And what a great way to visualize a coming together of all of those things. We do have a backbone in the program of adaptive leadership, which is a tried and tested area of leadership practice and a lot of methodologies, a lot of mindsets that will help you to learn how to adapt and thrive when your environment really is complex and uncertain. It's easy to solve technical problems. We simply put a solution in place and see whether that works. It's hard to solve adaptive systemic challenges, and the solutions require a different mindset, a different time frame, and a real commitment to continual learning and adaptation. So that's what we're teaching. We're doing that in a collaborative style, and I've talked already about the values that we try and talk about in the program, and have all sorts of ways of digging into that with leaders. You are part of a network as well. And because we're in our 36th year as a program, as Tara mentioned, you really are joining a true network. The current cohort, exactly as we're speaking, are starting work on their collective leadership action projects, which are a vehicle in the program that enables the current cohort to reach out and connect with past year groups as well. And that's an example of the way in which we help leaders to connect. And we're really grappling with the big issues that are affecting communities now. We want to get practical about change. And becoming a Williamson Fellow is potentially something that you can make use of in the rest of your career. So that enables you to really take on those larger scale challenges that will take many people, many talents, many different approaches, and maybe a lot of time to make progress with. So it's ambitious. Ryan, next slide, please. So there are outcomes that we're driving towards. We will share these with you. There's a lot of text here, but the summary is really that by holding the program outcomes in your mind, there are important goals for you and there are important goals for your organizations. And I would also add community into that as well. So at this stage of your journey, I would be encouraging you personally to be talking both with those who will support you in your application and also talking with those in your organization whose backing, whose perspective might help you to prepare for your application and then ultimately for taking part in the program as well. It's really worth sounding some of these messages with people now, and perhaps Alma and Jay will give us a sense of how they approach this in a couple of minutes. And then just briefly getting to the nuts and bolts of it, moving on to how the program looks. It does all come together. If you can move forwards, Ryan, thank you. We work on what we call program days. And coming together for program days means we're in what's known as a holding environment, a space and a place in which we can challenge each other to really go into our learning zones and to get outside of our comfort zones. So in the service of individual leadership and collective leadership, we have a number of leadership days where we essentially investigate and practice leadership together. We have theme days where we hear from seasoned leaders from community, working on the issues that we want to work on, and trying to take as many different perspectives as we can on what is happening, what do leaders need to be thinking about, and what do they need to be working upon. We come together for 4 immersives in the program. one at the start of the year and one at the end of the year in Marysville, Tangerang country, north of Melbourne. And we have two regional immersives, one in May and one in August, where we visit the Goulburn Valley region. And we also go southwest to Warrnambool as well. And I've mentioned the collective impact projects already, a vehicle for change that helps you apply, test, and challenge what you're learning along the way. And then we do have a program schedule, lastly. And so we will share this, and this is also available on the website. Again, very important to know that this is a marathon and not a sprint. It is a 10-month program. There's no need to take it all in one enormous bite. We can break this off and take it month by month, factoring in that it is a serious commitment. There is a lot of support available there for you too, both from the Leadership Victoria team, from your peers in the program, and quite likely from your organisations too. So do have conversations with us about how this is looking to you. We want to make sure that by the time you arrive in the program for day one, you're really feeling confident and prepared and ready to jump in. So Jodie and I are looking forward very much to getting to know you and wish you every success in your application for Williamson. I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to the important people who are Alma and Jay, and they're going to be sharing a little bit of their experience of the program and the difference that it's made for them. So over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Katie. Oh, sorry, I was going to say thanks, Katie. I was just going to say, Alma, do you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I'm just going to jump in there, so thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Alma. I'm the recruitment manager at Belmont People for our Melbourne office. I might start by just giving a little bit of background about myself because it ties into why or what led me to Williamson and my journey since then. So I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and growing up, my parents moved countries every 3 or 4 years. They were diplomats, and I've had the privilege of living in 8 countries. But I didn't realize this at the time. But what I really lacked because of that upbringing was I didn't really get or struggle with the sense of belonging and sense of community because my community changed every 3 or 4 years. So that was really hard for me growing up, having to go into a new school or having to go into a new setting and to find and rebuild my identity every time. I moved to Melbourne right before COVID hit with my ex and my daughter to be closer to my family who are based in Sydney. And when I got to Melbourne, COVID hit. And as a result, I didn't really get to build community. I was kind of stuck at home. I was working remotely. I was pretty unhappy with where I was at with my life and with my career. And I couldn't identify what that was. My values were also in question in the sense I struggled to really identify what they were. And I was a little bit of a people pleaser. So I guess it really, I was struggling to choose what side I was on so many things in my life. I came across Williamson because a few people mentioned it to me, and it was interesting because it was through word of mouth, but I heard it from someone who worked in government, but also someone who worked in not-for-profit, and then a third time from someone who worked in corporate. So when a few people started to mention it and how it affected them, it piqued my interest, and I joined an information session like this one. What I really saw at that time, and I'm really trying to put myself in the shoes that some of you might be sitting in today, was I wasn't sure what I wanted with my life and my career. And I watched the recording of all the information sessions, and all the participants were A, authentic, B, just were really strong with their values and knew what they wanted to do with their life. So I loved that. And that's what I was seeking at the time. I was probably one of the younger applicants at the time. I remember I was 28 when I applied. So for me, I was kind of wanting that surety and that clarity. Going through the process, I had a lot of imposter syndrome because I wasn't sure if I was ready to do Williamson. I wasn't sure of what commitments it entailed. But as I went through the process, I realized I really wanted to be a part of the program and I was seeking that clarity. So that kept me going. And now that I look back, absolutely no regrets. So that was what drew me to Williamson and what my motivation was and what my why was. I wanted that clarity, wanted to really solidify what my values were. It was, so people talk about the transformational element of Williamson, and for so many people, it's during the program, and for some, it's not, some it's after. For me, it very much was during the program because I actually resigned from my work before I started Williamson, so I was able to give it all my time and energy, and I think I got a lot out of it because of that. And that was just not intentional, it was just circumstances at the time. But it was incredibly transformational. And what, I suppose, if I were to answer what the transformation is or how someone seeks, it's really hard to pinpoint. But I would relate it to this example, which is when we went to the Marysville Immersive, and then sort of that final closing ceremony as well. I went through the woods for a walk, and there was this board I saw about seeds and how after the bushfires, there was this germination that happened for some of the seeds and how it happened at different points of time. And the I suppose, non-sciencey way of explaining that was that happened at the right time and when the environment was ready. And I remember sharing that at our, I suppose, graduation ceremony or whatever ceremony it was, I forget what it's called, but I was fortunate enough to be giving the valedictorian speech. And I remember sharing that because some of us went through that period of transformation and saw that year, and some of us didn't. And that's what I loved about the program, because you can keep getting more out of it. And even from a return of investment perspective, I love that. I am still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still in touch with the Williamson community. I'm catching up with someone tomorrow, in fact, and no other program gives you that ongoing learning opportunity because, as Katie said, it's all about the peers and the people that you connect and network with. And to go back to my first story of wanting that sense of belonging and community and what I struggled with growing up, I've actually found that through the Williamson community, and as a result, through the community in Melbourne. So now my daughter and I call Melbourne home, and this year that was one of my sort of goals, to catch up with people I know. And because Williamson was what I did right after COVID when I wasn't working, it is in so many ways my community now, and you get this incredible network of people that you constantly learn from. And I learn best with shared storytelling, so I'm constantly learning from these amazing groups of people. Yeah, I might stop there because I think I hit my 5 minutes. But that's just a snippet of my journey, what drew me to Williamson, and the ongoing learning that I still get as well from the community.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alma. It's always a joy to hear your perspective. I haven't heard that story about your walk in the forest. That was beautiful. Thank you. Now, from one wonderful storyteller over to another, I'd love to invite Jay to share his perception of his Williamson experience. So thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Tara. And thanks, Alma, for sharing your story, and Katie and Jody and Ryan for kicking everything off. I'm really grateful to be here and really pleased to be a Williamson Fellow. If you're on this call because you've heard of Williamson and you are interested and curious about Williamson, you are ahead of where I was at this point in the Williamson process. I found out about it by accident. A guy that I knew who mentioned the fact that he had done Williamson, and I didn't know what it was. And I went back and looked it up and started to get really interested in it. And I thought, there's a lot that I could learn here. And there's a lot that will challenge me and help me grow and help me evolve. And really, when I looked at it, it was because I was working for the Australian Football League at the time. So I'm currently at Triple M Radio. I'm the content director there, which means that I'm responsible for anything that's on air that's not live sport. So if you ever have a complaint or concern, feel free to hit me up. If you want different types of music played, let me know. We'll see what we can do. But I looked at it and I thought, I'm at the AFL, and the AFL is a huge organization and responsible for one of the amazing traditions of Australia and Australian sport. And when I started thinking about the Williamson Community Program, and when I looked into it a little bit more, I thought, this is what the AFL is about. The AFL is about community. It just calls them fans. And when I looked at that and I think about it from a Triple M perspective, we're also about community. And from a Triple M perspective, we're looking at our audience and our fans, and that is our community. Triple M is a unique and interesting brand in the media in that people who listen to Triple M know what it means, and people who don't listen to Triple M think they know what it means and have a perception of it. And the thing that we always talk about is that with Triple M, there's always something that we can be doing in the community and for our audience. And there is always a place that we can be involved in the lives of the people who are listening to us. And that has always interested me, because these big organizations need to and should be playing a part in where we're at as a community and as a society. And I wanted to be part of those conversations. I wanted to be part of that process. I wanted to be involved in working with organizations on how they grow and change. You heard Katie talk about adaptive challenges. And one of the first things I wrote down in preparation for this, I went back and I looked at my notes from 2023. And one of the first things I wrote down was that adaptive work is necessary when existing deeply held beliefs are challenged. And the AFL and Triple M are traditional organizations that have deeply held beliefs about what they do, about why they do it. And a lot of those things are being challenged, rightfully so. And it is work that needs to be done at every level. And I've been really interested to see how Williamson gave me a different way of thinking about things. I've always been in the media. I've been in the media for 30 years. And one of the things that has helped me in my career is that I can move on very quickly. If there's a story and it's working, great. And if it's not working, I can just move on to the next one. And that's been terrific professionally. Hasn't been so good personally, to be able to move on quickly like that. People don't understand why you can be down the road into a totally different headspace after a very short amount of time. And what I want to be able to do, and what Williamson showed me, was that it's about the pause, and it's about the slowing down and staying curious about all of the things of why they're working and what we can do. And so I looked into Williamson. I wanted to know about it, and I've discovered that a family friend did Williamson in 1999, and he and I had talked a lot. We'd known each other for several years, and when I called and told him I was interested in doing Williamson, our conversation changed. We immediately started talking. He became very much more open and much more enthusiastic about what I was looking at and thinking about and reckoning with. And it just put our conversation on a different level. I hadn't even done Williamson yet, but it was suddenly there was a different type of energy there between me and him. He described it as life-changing. And I thought that is a huge call for a guy that I've known and have seen his life and how he lives his life. And I wanted to know more about how that came together for him. So I went through the process. I did what hopefully a lot of you are considering doing and looking at doing in the next little bit. And I went through that process. I did the work. I started to do the work before everything kicked off in Marysville in 2023. And we had a huge group that year. We had 2 cohorts, and we were pretty tight and still are. And it has been one of the joys of my life, getting to know people from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of organizations, and hearing their experience and hearing how they live their lives and what motivates them, and then seeing how I can bring some of that into my work, but also into my life. And I think that's the thing that you'll spend a lot of time in Williamson talking about managing self. And Katie mentioned it, in her introduction about the inner development for the outward impact. And that managing self component is something that I think about all the time. Because before I used to think, well, it's not about what I am feeling or thinking or do. It's about what I'm doing and about the decisions that I'm making. And I realize it's about all of the things that inform those decisions that get me to that point, and what is actually going on inside, and how do I get support and direction from the people in this program. And that is something that continues to grow and develop. And I'm really grateful to have been part of Williamson. And I'm really excited for anybody who's getting ready to do it or even thinking about doing it, because it is a big, big, meaty program that you can really sink your teeth into and get a lot out of. And just by turning up and being there, you get a lot out of it. So I'm grateful to be part of this still, and to be able to share a little bit of my experience. That's not much there. I feel like I've just sort of scratched the surface, but I'm grateful to be with you here tonight.
Thanks, Kay. It's so interesting to hear, two very different people from very different backgrounds, very different industries, doing different work, but to hear with such vulnerability how much as an adult you've still been able to grow and change. We know obviously at Leadership Victoria we've been delivering Williamson Community Leadership Program now for 35 years, and so we're in a constant state of learning and growing and teaching and learning, but we don't often get that chance as adults to kind of step into a place and dedicate that much time to it. So you did talk, Jay, that it is a meaty program. It's a 10-month program. And so we love that we get to have these information sessions to kind of open up the floor to the potential applicants that are here with us. So if you do have any questions of the people here that are joining us today, please pop them in the chat. We'd love to be able to ask both Alma or Jay or Jody and Katie about those questions. So this is your time to kind of put your questions out there. I have a couple of questions though that I'm going to kick off, because Alma, you talked about imposter syndrome, and that even before the program, and Jay, I can see you're nodding your head as well. At what point did you look at yourself and understand that imposter syndrome and realize that you were ready to step into that space of applying for Williamson? And did imposter syndrome show up in other ways even throughout the program? Jay, maybe over to you first.
Sure. I think that with it, one of the questions that I was asked is, if you're given a spot in Williamson, it means somebody else is not getting a spot. And so what are you going to do with it? And that really made me think, well, man, do I deserve this? Do I deserve to be here? And what can I do with it? And that is that knowing that that's part of the process just sort of straightened me up on how I was thinking about it. It wasn't just something that it was going to be, oh, it might be interesting, it might be fun, I might learn something. It was like, no, these are serious people who are getting involved in something that is meaningful and matters. The thing that I think about is, we're not fixed, we're not stuck. We're all works in progress, and it's important to acknowledge that. What I think about how I operate now is different to what I thought about and how I operated when I was new in the media. I've lived in Australia for 22 years. I'm from the United States. I'm currently in my parents' house in St. Charles, Missouri, where they have lived in this house for 58 years, and I'm back visiting family. So I think that, there is consistency throughout all of it, and we are the same person, but we're also growing and changing over years, and if we're lucky enough, decades. And I think that, I've started to learn a lot, and I still feel like there's a lot more to learn.
Absolutely. Alma, is there anything that you want to add to that?
I think I had imposter syndrome throughout the program, if I'm honest.
Mm.
Yeah, it just always crept up. Probably maybe only when I got to the closing immersive, and I'll be honest, I think when I was voted valedictorian, I was shocked. Like it genuinely shocked me. And I think um that's when I realized, okay, maybe I did deserve to be here.
Mm.
And everyone was crying and saying everyone was sort of, happy that, they were celebrating because they were done with the program. I ducked out of there because I was so overwhelmed with emotion. That's when I went for a walk around, in the woods and saw that thing about seeds and I had a massive cry, I'm not gonna lie. Um, yeah, but it was there throughout the program. I think what got me through the initial application process was I said, I'm going to be my authentic self and just trust the process. And if I'm getting through, um, that, I deserve to have that spot. And then when I sat at the immersive, that was one of the first things that was told to all of us, that you are here because you deserve to be here. And I had to remind myself of that as I went through the program because the imposter syndrome kept creeping up. And it was, I think Jay talked about this, just managing self, going, putting that aside, going, well, I am here and I've taken this spot and what am I going to do with it? But yeah, it's still there and I'm still dealing with that and still managing that. And I think, as I said, only when I got to the end, I kind of went, oh my goodness, okay, well, now I've done the program and what am I doing with what I've learned? And that's actually kept me going, moving forward. And I've kind of gone, what are my learnings and how am I affecting community that way? So just using that imposter syndrome to kind of go, all right, Alma, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah.
Just ushering myself.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Emma. One of the questions that I've been asking a lot of fellows lately is, if I was to look at you at work, where does Williamson show up in the leadership decisions or strategy or actions that you're taking? Jay, you mentioned a story yesterday when we were chatting, and I wondered whether or not you wanted to share. Like, it's like, how does Williamson show up in your work?
Yeah, I think one of the things, when I talked about managing self and doing all that, there's a lot of that can feel very sort of esoteric and big and general. And there are a lot of specifics and practical things that come out of Williamson as well over that period. And one of the things that I think about is just engaging unusual voices, right? And that's one of the lessons that we learned. And it hit me because I've always been in an industry that moves really quickly. And sometimes our deadlines are minutes. Sometimes if you are doing a show and it's on air, deadlines are 30 seconds and you've got to just move and get things on air. And when I came back to Triple M, this is my third time at the organization in a different role. And when I came back, somebody approached me and they said, we need to decide what we're going to do with a particular thing. And I said, okay, great. How do you want to do that? And they're like, well, we would normally just work that out. I said, oh, why don't we get some people together and let's talk about it. Let's get some more people involved in that process. And that was something that had directly come from Williamson. And then we turned up in the room, and I won't use names, but it was me and three other guys. And I looked around and I'm like, okay, let's get some other voices in here. Let's get some other people. And I could see that they're kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, there's four of us now getting ready to decide on something that takes two. And I just said, look, we can't afford to have meetings that are 100% dude. We've got to have a variety of thinking here. We've got to have some different input. We've got to have some different connections on how we're going to do this. And it just became very, very obvious that that was something that, for me, had come from Williamson. And those little sorts of things, they happen all the time. Whether it's pausing and, you'll hear people talk about it in Williamson, getting on the balcony or deciding who does the work, or all of these different things that come up over the 10 months. I find myself reflecting on it and going, okay, that's interesting, because that is something that I learned 2 years ago, or it's something that I had been thinking about prior to 2 years ago, but I didn't have the words or the way to sort of implement it into my day-to-day.
Yeah, brilliant. I've got a question here from Luke for Alma. It said that you obviously had a lot of change and upheaval in your life as it stood immediately prior to participating in Williamson. What was the greatest challenge that you needed to balance? And how did Williamson do that for you?
I'm guessing greatest challenge that I had to balance during the program. I think, yeah, there was a lot of change going into it. And I'll be honest, I think there was so much uncertainty in my life, just in general, because I had decided what I didn't want to do with my career. I was hoping for Williamson to give me clarity around that and shape my values. But I was also going through a very big change in my personal life, and I've shared pretty openly about this, so I'm happy to touch on it. But I went through separation whilst at Williamson. So I think what Williamson taught me in that process was just to trust the process. And I think that was the biggest challenge, because there was so much that I couldn't control and was outside of my hands. And so much that, yeah, just a lot of uncertainty. But Williamson taught me to sit in uncertainty. And I know, Jay, when we caught up with Tara, we spoke about this, but sitting when there was so much change happening. And that was essentially the biggest challenge, because I was like, I want to know what's a dream job? What do I do? And, am I staying in this relationship? Am I getting out of this relationship? What am I doing with my life? And I wanted quick decisions. I was impatient, and I was wanting Williamson to help me out with that answer. And that was challenging because, we're used to immediate gratification. But that was the learning with Williamson, with trusting the process, going on that journey. And it took a while for that all to play out, and it was incredibly hard. But now it's such a useful skill to have, sitting in uncertainty.
Yes, definitely. One of the things I often hear from fellows as well is that being okay with not knowing as a leader. We talk a lot about in the office around what's happening for leaders at the moment in 2025, and a lot of it is leading in times where we don't have the answers. We're leading in a time of AI, of political, of social disruption, and we don't know what the answers are going to be. But when you're leading with adaptive frameworks and with that sense of confidence, then you're understanding that you don't need to know the answers as a leader. Is that something that you agree with, Alma and Jay, that Williamson was able to prepare you for that sense of leading when you don't necessarily know all the answers?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. Yeah, absolutely. I think as a leader, there's only so much and so much you can, I don't want to use the word control, but influence. And most of the time we're leading in times of uncertainty and change and not knowing the whole context, and you're working with the pieces you have. That is, pretty much any leadership challenge, and most leadership roles have that. Life has that. But it's such an important skill to have. And I think it is what people get stuck on, like just in general. So reflecting on my personal career journey, I stepped into this role of recruitment and essentially took on this role with no recruitment background, as I was the first person to be hired at a managerial level with no background. So again, just going back to what you just asked, Tara, there's so much uncertainty, so much change, so much I didn't know, but it's kind of learning to navigate that. And I think Williamson gave me a lot of tools around that as well. But also outside of work, I think it's helped me in a lot of situations in life. Just navigating life, you can use it. So that's one of the things I did like about the program. And when I was doing the program, I wasn't working, so I couldn't apply a lot of the principles that we were discussing, a lot of the things in a work context. So I was able to use it in the sense of community and family, which was actually invaluable because you can now use the same situations. So now when I'm in a family gathering and I see certain dynamics at play, I'm like, okay, I know how to navigate this. But it's just skills you can use in life.
Yeah, I think not knowing it's okay, and I think that the thing that Williamson over those 10 months did and does is it exposes you, or exposed me, to a lot of things that I didn't know, and a lot of things that I didn't have answers to, and that I had to sit with and think about and wrestle with. And so there were always opportunities to understand and to be shown that I didn't have all the answers. As much as I would love to be able to, believe that I do, I know that I don't. And to your point, Tara, it is something, it does give you that ability to go, well, you know what? I mean, leadership's not about having the answers. It's about helping people find an answer or make progress toward an answer. And sometimes it takes a lot longer than, we might think it would, but it's worth it. And it's a process that I've enjoyed and continue to enjoy. And I think that's the thing, is that I became very curious about a whole lot of different things. And one of the things that I loved about Williamson is that it was, like I said, a lot of work, a lot of time, but when else are you going to carve out time to discuss, reckon with, think about, interrogate different ideas throughout the year in different contexts with a whole bunch of different people and learning from them? And that, being exposed to that process was a huge part of what I loved about Williamson.
You could arguably describe the program as a year-long conversation.
Sure.
Right? I don't know if that resonates at all.
Yeah.
But the dialogue that we need in some ways to make progress on those complex social issues is in some way here in this microcosm of the program. It's a place where there is an unusual amount of space, a rare space that when you're under pressure, when you're delivering, when you're executing, you're delivering on all the things you need to do organizationally and in your leadership remit, you may not get that space. So the personal development strand of the program holds those kinds of conversational spaces. Those of you coming in next year will work with Jody and me pretty extensively around how you're making sense of things. Now, why do I think like that? What assumptions am I making? What biases might I be leaning into, as Jay and Alma have been talking a little bit about in their experience? But it's also a conversation with your peers as well. So thank you for sharing your experiences, both of you. I don't know, there's a podcast I listen to where the host at the end, it's called Coaching for Leaders, and the host at the end always asks, what's one thing you're thinking differently about? So I might be cheeky and drop that in for you, Jay and Alma. What's one thing you're thinking differently about now that you wouldn't have expected at the start of the program?
It's a really good question. It's tempting to say everything, but I know that's not much of an answer. I think the thing that I'm thinking about is one of the things I think about differently is how do I give my team the tools to be leaders? It's really important that I share this and give people, my experience, and always looking at how do I help those people develop. Previously, I probably looked at people and I'm like, okay, we've got a job to do. We have to get in there. We've got to perform. We've got to execute. We've got to deliver on all of these different sorts of things. That's what we're here to do. And the thing I look at it now is like, no, what we're here to do is to cultivate the strongest possible relationships so that everybody can do their best work and that everybody can take it from a leadership standpoint, regardless of where they're at in the team.
I might say what I'm thinking about differently is I'm always kind of questioning myself and going, uh, it's a bit like, am I hearing all the voices that I need to? Because um, I kind of go, and I kind of even have to do that on the day to day when I get stuck in the grind and I'm sort of doing my work and my community. I'm kind of going, am I just putting myself in that bubble? And I think that's something I constantly reflect on. And I've been reflecting on recently. And, I was like, I feel like I'm just doing the same things in the same community. I always go to the same yoga class. It's school, and then it's work, and it's the same touch points. And like, am I adding new voices to my life? And I'm like now doing horse riding lessons in Inverloch every fortnight, and I have a new community I'm in touch with. But it's that. And then I think just adding new voices in my life and to challenge what I'm thinking, because that is, I think, invaluable. And yeah, that's something I'm thinking about differently and asking myself. Yeah.
Thanks, Alma. Thanks, Jay. We're coming up to kind of having just less than 10 minutes left. And one of the things I'd really like come back to Katie is some of the other parts of the program that people might experience. We know that there's immersives, we know that there's great collective, but what other tools can people expect in the program?
Yeah, thanks. A little bit more of a deeper dive. One part of the program that's very important, and Jay and Alma have both referenced this, is tools for taking perspective. We're all looking at the world in our own way, through our own lenses. And most of the time, we don't know that we're doing that. We don't think about how our way of thinking is showing us different things. So what Alma sees and what Jay sees might end up sitting in those bubbles that Alma was talking about. So how can we bring those bubbles together and have a conversation about the difference of those perspectives? Maybe a third perspective will emerge. So these are called diagnostic tools to help us really grapple with the things we're not yet seeing, so that we effectively opening up way more options, way more choices for action than we had when we only saw one facet, one aspect of the space that we were looking at. So imagine the ways in which opening up perspectives like that could be helpful to you. Suddenly you don't have one solution, you've got 20. So there are lots of tools like that in the program. And the other thing that I might mention is related to the personal development strand of the we're one of the few programs in Australia, and I think actually more generally globally overseas as well, a program of this size. You actually really get to investigate your values and your beliefs, and we really support that quite deeply in the program through a set of tools that are based around adult development, which is lifelong development, essentially. And so you will receive a one-to-one coaching session with either Jody or myself, and you'll take part in a conversation that investigates here, how am I seeing myself, my life, my leadership, my relationships, my context? What are the frames that I'm using, and how might I bust out of those in different ways that might be more powerful for me? And that coaching conversation then filters on into the rest of the program. So I mentioned earlier challenge and support, and that's a good example of where you will go into your learning zone. You will be outside of your normal, comfortable habits. And then Jody and I are here to support you, and your peers are also in the program to support you as we have those deeper dive conversations. Lots of other opportunities along the way. It's a very wide-ranging program, but those are the two that probably come to mind. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Well, we're at that time now. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the program from our faculty. We've heard the voices of Alma and Jay. We also have an absolute amazing network of Williamson Fellows. Katie mentioned about 1,400 Williamson Fellows from the last 35 years. So if you feel like you wanted to reach out and get perspective from someone else, maybe in the industry or sector that you're working from, please do reach out to us, to me, Tara at leadershipvictoria.org, or contact us through the website. This is our last and final information session that we're going to be running for this year's campaign. We will be closing the application phase on the 11th of August. I often say to people that you can actually apply in one sitting, but I wouldn't advise it. I recommend that people go on to the application platform, have a look at the questions, think about it. You need to get an endorsement letter from your workplace or from those around you. And like we've also heard from our fellows tonight, it's a really good idea to go away and talk to those in your networks, not just your professional, but also your personal, because it is quite a big decision to apply and to go into the Williamson program. I will say that with the application phase as well, one thing that I often say to people is, and we've heard this tonight again, is to bring your authentic self. We want to know about your professional leadership experience. Yes, that's important, but we also want to know who you are and what are you passionate about. What do you know about yourself so far, and what are you going to bring into the program? One of the things we also looked at is lived experience. It's not just about the leadership, years of leadership title that you might have had in your workplace, but also what other leadership roles have you held in your community. This all comes into play when we look at who we would like to make offers to within the program. Next year for 2026, there will be 45 places offered for Williamson, which sounds like not many, but when you get to know that you're going to have 45 new friends and new network, and that we divide that across government leaders, across for-profit and corporate leaders, as well as community leaders, it's quite an exciting mix. Is there anything else, Katie, that you want to add as we close out our information session?
I just want to mention a phrase that people might hear as you're exploring. You might hear someone saying, "Do you feel you're Williamson ready? Do you feel you're Williamson ready?" And if you hear that phrase, it's a good question to ask yourself. Am I Williamson ready? But please know that it's also a little bit of a myth. And if you're unsure whether you are ready, but you're finding that this conversation has sparked questions that are exciting you, chances are you might be Williamson ready. It might not feel like that, and yet you might be. So I would just offer that as a word of encouragement. Doubt is your friend, and you will learn to love the questions in this program alongside your peers. So go for it would be my encouragement. I think that's it, Tara.
Thanks, Katie. I'd like to say a big thank you to Jay and Alma for joining us today, and to Katie and Jody and Ryan and Cozzy and all of the Leadership Victoria team. We look forward to hearing from you. We will be sending out, obviously, the recording and some information about today's session, but we will also open to your questions. So please be curious. Please come to us if you have any questions. You have time. And again, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us this evening, and be safe and be well. Thank you.